Well, thank you everyone for joining us today in the latest in the Millar Insight series online. My name is Mark Catchlove and I lead the Millar Insight Group. And in case you don't know, Millar is a family of brands, and we've listed all those in front of you. And all these brands design and manufacture products for places where people live, where they learn, where they get healed, and where they work. And I'm really pleased today to welcome someone from the Millar family, Bethany Willan from NaughtOne, who is the head of sustainability and communities at NaughtOne. And she's going to be talking about the subject of sustainability. And the title is Truth in the Tangle, Navigating the Complexity of Sustainability. And I can guarantee today that some of that complexity will go away and there'll be a lot more clarity at the end of it. But I'm guessing you're going to have questions along the way. So do use the chat box for asking those questions, and we will hold them back for Bethany at the end. Looking forward to a great session. Bethany, over to you.
Thanks, Mark. So hi everyone. As Mark has just said, I am Bethany Willan and I am Head of Sustainability and Communities here at NaughtOne. So I've worked in sustainability nearly 6 years now, and 3 of those have been here at NaughtOne. Today I'm going to show you some of the more complex elements of sustainability, both more generally and also in the furniture industry specifically, and hopefully try and show you how you can begin to untangle what you read, see and hear, so you can be more informed and therefore make more informed decisions. Really quickly, before we dive in, I just wanted to introduce NaughtOne to those on the call that might be unfamiliar with us. So we're a British brand, part of the Millar Collective, as Mark said, that designs and manufactures furniture for commercial spaces. We stand for good design, both inside and out, and are a global partner to renowned brands and local companies around the world. So, sustainability can feel overwhelmingly complex for several interconnected reasons. The scale and the scope of the climate crisis can cause paralysis. How can one person impact climate change, biodiversity loss, water scarcity, air pollution, and then the social and economic systems that surround these issues in a positive way? I have a job in sustainability and it still can feel a little bit too much sometimes. Humans naturally struggle with problems that feel abstract, distant and immense, and this problem is amplified when the language used is inaccessible. Jargon, acronyms and technical terms can make any idea feel inaccessible, and instead of helping, they create a wall between the reader or the listener. The more technical the language is, the narrower the audience is that can follow it, in any subject, not just sustainability, which again reinforces that narrative that you as an individual can't make a difference. And then perhaps the most dangerous of all is this type of jargon creates unhelpful noise that can often stifle action. How can we figure out what action we need to take when we're too busy trying to decode complex terms, studies and reports? And then we add in all the competing certifications and standards, and suddenly everything is louder than ever. So this noise can cause 2 things: misinformation or misunderstanding. Different in intent, but both can lead consumers to make choices that don't actually support sustainability. There's often marketing pressure to appear progressive. People often reach for simple claims because they're easy to communicate, but these can often obscure trade-offs. On the slide, I've included some language that matters to NaughtOne, but that is often commonly misused, not just in the furniture industry, but in many manufacturing contexts, to show how easily they can be used inaccurately, even with the best intentions. So firstly, we have net zero. Net zero is a term that many people have heard, but one that's often interpreted in different ways. It essentially means balancing the amount of greenhouse gases emitted into the atmosphere with the amount removed or offset. There are 2 things that I want to explore here with net zero. The first being what's captured under the umbrella of net zero. But first, to explain why net zero isn't always as straightforward as it seems, we need to break down the carbon scopes. There are 3 scopes of carbon emissions. Scope 1 are the direct emissions that a company produces itself. Scope 2 are the indirect emissions from the energy the company buys, and then extending beyond both of these scopes is something called Scope 3, which is all other indirect emissions across the supply chain. So here's why it's complicated. Many companies claim net zero by only focusing on Scope 1 and Scope 2. This is because Scope 3 is much harder to measure and reduce. But it's often the biggest part of the company's emissions, so leaving it out means net zero doesn't always reflect the company's full impact. Yet, it's this kind of detail that often goes unnoticed by many consumers, despite influencing how we choose what to buy. Now, the second point around offsets, relying on them too heavily to achieve net zero is problematic. They can be considered a quick fix, allowing a company to achieve net zero without doing anything actually meaningful to reduce them. Essentially, carbon offsets are when individuals or companies can fund projects that reduce or remove CO2 elsewhere, like planting trees or renewable energy. When done correctly, they can have some benefits, but they often come with problems and limitations. Crucially, carbon offsets need to remove or reduce emissions that wouldn't have happened otherwise. Many offset projects fail this test, as they would have happened regardless. Secondly, some offsets are not permanent. It has been known that some tree planting offsetting schemes only have land rights for around 10 years, when it takes anywhere between 20 and 50 years for the trees to mature and start to sequester carbon. And then there's no guarantee that the trees will even reach maturity. All kinds of things can intervene, such as wildfires or illegal deforestation. With carbon offsets, it's also really hard to accurately measure how much carbon is being removed or avoided. People often have to rely on different methodologies and all kinds of different estimates, which can skew things slightly. So it's important to understand a company's net zero strategies if this is something that's important to you. Similarly, the way a company achieves carbon neutrality is often by purchasing offsets rather than reducing its actual emissions. And because the term isn't consistently regulated currently, it can often be misused for exaggerated claims, making it harder for consumers to understand who's genuinely taking action and who's just paying for a label. So let's shift focus to recyclability for a second. Probably one of the easier to understand concepts in sustainability. Sometimes you will come across a product labelled as recyclable, and it is technically, but probably at a very specific recycling plant hundreds of miles away from the user, when a complex, energy-intensive manufacturing process is used to separate the materials. Unfortunately, just because a product is labelled as recyclable doesn't mean it actually will be. The materials used, the local recycling infrastructure, and whether the components can be separated all determine if a product is truly recycled. And this isn't to say that we shouldn't use these materials. Often they are innovative alternatives to otherwise damaging materials, but consumers should be aware of these specifics. Next up, let's explore sustainable timber. So we see this a lot, particularly in the furniture industry, as wood in its various forms is a commonly used material. The use of sustainable implies that logging has no negative environmental impact, but in reality, almost all logging alters ecosystems to some degree. The carbon impact is also still present during the actual logging, which is quite energy intensive, the transportation of the wood, and then the processing of the timber, and then also at the end of its life. So when choosing sustainable timber, going with a well-known certification is normally advised, and whilst these still do have some issues, you can be assured that they are audited and credible. And then finally, to wrap this slide up, let's discuss circularity. Circularity deserves its own dedicated presentation, given how vast, complex and rapidly evolving the topic is. But for now, I'll just highlight how it sometimes is misused and give you a sense of how it's really put into practice. So first, let's define. Circularity is a concept that challenges the traditional linear system of take, make, waste, and instead focuses on keeping resources in use for as long as possible, minimising waste and regenerating natural materials. What it is not is just recycling. True circularity goes beyond recycling. It's about designing out waste, making sure that products and materials are kept in use for as long as possible, and that there are services in place to help facilitate this. Repair networks, reupholstery services, second, third and fourth life opportunities are all part of circularity. But often, circularity is used when products' packaging can be recycled or if there's a percentage of recycled content within a product. And whilst these things are great, it does not mean the product is fully circular. And for those unfamiliar with the term, it could be misleading. While the issues we've covered are complex, this complexity doesn't mean we give up. It actually means that we just need more transparency and clarity. And this is more important as we move forward. Okay, so we've just discussed how we as people experience sustainability out in the world with its various terminologies and specifics. Let's now deep dive into how the furniture industry experiences it. So these are the main milestones in a product's journey. We're going to take a close look at each and see what sustainability can look like, dispel some myths and explain the challenges that the furniture industry is facing in each. So, as I've touched on, raw materials often have the most significant environmental impact on a product due to intensive extracting and manufacturing processes, or simply just inherently due to the type of material that it is. Materials like steel require huge amounts of energy to heat the iron ore, and the energy used tends to be from fossil fuels. Marble, for example, is a very carbon-intensive material due to the way that you have to extract it from the quarry and how heavy it is to transport around the world. A raw material that presents a particular challenge in the furniture industry is foam. It features heavily in all kinds of upholstered furniture, and because it's derived from petroleum, which is a fossil fuel, it carries a high carbon footprint. On top of that, foam is exceptionally difficult to recycle or dispose of at the end of its life. However, on the flip side, foam is incredibly resilient and long-lasting, which means it can stay in use for many years. There are more sustainable alternatives emerging on the market, which is really exciting. However, they're not always suitable for contract environments where durability and resistance to wear and tear are essential. So we're left with a little bit of a dilemma. Do we choose a more sustainable alternative that may not last as long, potentially leading to more frequent replacement or disposal? Or do we choose a traditional material that performs well over time but carries a higher environmental impact? It's a really tough balance, and there isn't a simple right answer right now. What we can do is keep pushing for innovation, working towards a future where materials are both sustainable and long-lasting, and where we don't need to make these kind of compromises. And whilst materials account for most of the product's embodied carbon, factory operations still play a crucial role in its overall sustainability. The type of energy a factory relies on, whether it's fossil fuels like coal and natural gas versus renewable sources, can significantly alter a product's carbon footprint. Waste reduction measures such as minimising offcuts and scrap, reusing leftover materials, and purchasing only what's needed also meaningfully reduce the environmental impact. Clean chemistry is another example. In furniture, you can find chemicals in finishes and adhesives and processors. Choosing chemicals that are low toxicity, biodegradable, and responsibly sourced are important for the overall sustainability of the product. Choosing safer chemicals also supports circularity. Materials made with cleaner chemistry are often easy to recycle or dispose of responsibly at the end of life. Where your factory is in relation to your suppliers also plays a key role. Local suppliers reduce the need for goods transportation, and fewer miles travelled means less carbon emitted. It also supports local economies, can lower costs for everyone, and shorten supply chains, making your operations more resilient and sustainable overall. And finally, we have product quality. Product quality is a key part of sustainability. Well-made, durable products last longer, reducing the need for replacements and lowering overall environmental impact. Investing in quality from the outset through robust design, precise manufacturing and durable materials ensures that the environmental benefits of careful material choice and clean chemistry are not lost through early failure or discard. So now we're going to explore the challenges our products face once they've been made from our factories and are on the way to our customers. Transportation accounts for a major share of global carbon emissions. We're living in an ever-connected world, and consumers expect things more quickly than ever, regardless of what the product is. Air freight is really fast, but can be up to 40 to 50 times more carbon intensive than sea freight, which is much slower. When you're dealing with a global supply chain, goods move through factories, ports, ships, trucks, warehouses, via different modes of transport, each with different emissions and efficiencies. It's really complex, and petrochemicals are heavily embedded into the infrastructure. Cars, cargo ships, trucks, aeroplanes all run off fossil fuels. There are alternative fuels and vehicle technologies that are helping us move away from these fossil fuels, such as electric vehicles, hydrogen vehicles, biofuels, and sustainable aviation fuel. But these do all still have limitations. EVs, for example, are great, but as we all know, have limited range. Hydrogen vehicles often provide a bigger range than EVs and only produce water vapour as exhaust fumes, but there's limited refuelling options currently. We know what can work, but that technology isn't available at scale yet. And whilst getting these technologies up to scale are crucial, shortening supply chains through localisation is another strategy businesses can use to reduce emissions. So what I'm referring to here is something called localisation, which is all about manufacturing products closer to the customer. It reduces carbon, streamlines operations, and helps uplift local communities at the same time. By manufacturing products closer to the end consumer, product simply has to travel less, which means fewer emissions from air, sea, and truck transportation. Localising production is a simple but powerful way to cut emissions, and combining it with sustainable fuels and vehicle technologies, we're slowly untangling what a sustainable supply chain could look like. And then finally, we've got end-of-life, durability and repairability. One of the most powerful things any manufacturer can do is keep their products in use for as long as possible, and they can do this by making products durable and both repairable. Products that last a long time reduce waste and lower demand for raw materials, and being able to repair products extend a product's lifespan, which cuts emissions from manufacturing new replacements. The problem we face is it's difficult to make furniture, particularly ancillary furniture, that's both repairable and durable. If you want to make something easy to disassemble or something that's modular, you can introduce joints or connectors, but these can reduce the strength and longevity compared to a single solid piece. It's the same story with manufacturing methods. Glue is a great material for creating a permanent bond between parts, keeping things where they should be for the product's life. When it's time for that product to be repaired or recycled, the glue can make it different. This is why it's really important to design this type of thinking into a product. How can we make this chair last as long as it can in its first life? Then how can we design it so when it's time for its second life, it can easily have any repairs needed? And then how can we design this product so when it does reach the end of its second, or third, or fourth, or fifth life, it's easy to upcycle, recycle, and reuse no matter where it is in the world? It's really, really hard, and every inch of the product needs to be looked at through this lens. In short, designing for durability, repairability, and then eventual reuse requires thinking about every part of a product from the very beginning, because sustainable products don't just happen by chance, they're the result of really, really careful design. So far I've covered some of the tricky aspects of sustainability more generally, and then we've taken a close look at what this means for the furniture industry. Hopefully that's given you a little bit more clarity around some of the challenges that we're facing. What I thought would be useful now is to show how these ideas come together in the real world. So I want to talk to you about a product we make called Pippin. So for those of you that are not familiar with Pippin, Pippin is a movable lounge chair. It's equipped with hidden wheels and a strap, or not if you'd prefer it that way, perfect for sliding to where it's needed. Pippin won the Seal Award for Sustainable Product Design, due in part to the way that the frame comes apart like a 3D puzzle. Every component can be extracted and repaired, replaced, recycled, or repurposed. It's also future-proofed, meaning you can change the spec of the chair as your needs evolve. If the company's had a rebrand and your brand colours are changed, you can just zip off the cover and replace it. There is no need for a whole new chair. Pippin has been a hugely popular product for us, and we've worked really, really hard to localise it in Asia and North America, making it so that Pippin has to travel less miles to get to its final destination, which has significantly cut down the transportation emissions for this product. Now, I'm not saying that Pippin is the answer to all of our sustainability challenges. It's far from perfect, but it's a real example that I know well that I want to share with you all. And the exciting part is that we're constantly improving it. That's what sustainability really is, making small changes, refining what we already have, and designing new products to do less harm to the planet. So let's take a step back. Let's look at what the industry must do to evolve, be better, and be more accessible. First and foremost, the industry needs to be more transparent and honest with its data. Back to net zero. If your net zero target only refers to Scope 1 and Scope 2, state that clearly. Be very intentional with the words and the narrative that you put out into the world. Explain exactly how that product can be recycled and explain exactly which part of that product is circular and which bits are not, and why. Sharing difficulties in sustainability and how you're trying to overcome them can be much more powerful than just stating a blanket claim that's too vague to mean anything of any impact. Secondly, we need fewer but more rigorous certifications. This is something that I've not really had a chance to explore in great detail in this presentation, but in the furniture industry specifically, there are many certifications, all with slightly different criteria to meet, and all with a price tag to participate. This can marginalise smaller businesses who can't pay to play, and these certificates are often reduced to a tick box exercise. What's required are fewer certificates that target areas of the industry that really do need to change. Next, the industry needs to focus on placing more importance on durability and rejecting the idea of fast fashion in furniture. And with that thought, encouraging timeless design and aesthetic longevity, which does wonders for keeping a product in use. The Eames lounge chair is a testament to that. We need to prioritise repairability and plan for multiple life cycles. Uplift those satellite systems that can help embed circularity into supply chains, such as reupholstery services, repair networks, and take-back programmes. We need to avoid materials that can't be reused or recycled, and avoid designing products that can't be separated or use unkind chemicals to people and planet. Ultimately, a more sustainable furniture industry requires honesty, durability, and design that supports multiple lives, building trust and reducing waste and creating products that truly stand the test of time. So to wrap everything up, we've explored commonly misused sustainability terms. We've examined key challenges in the furniture industry. I've taken you through a real-world case study and considered what the industry needs to do moving forward. Going back to why sustainability often feels overwhelming, our brains are not wired to handle problems that are global, long-term, and systemic. We crave simple, actionable steps, yet sustainability often demands much more complex solutions. With that in mind, here are some thoughts to hold on to, and if they resonate, bring with you into your everyday life. So the first is, interrogate claims based on what matters to you. Is embodied carbon something that matters to you in your project? If it is, then query their carbon accounting methodology. If circularity is something that you want to see more of, ask how easy a product is to repair or take apart if something needs fixing. Secondly, don't be put off if you read something about sustainability and it's confusing. It is not you, it's them. Sustainability can be confusing, but it can also be presented in an accessible way, so persevere. And then lastly, this is cheating slightly, as the third takeaway isn't so much a takeaway, but more of a call to action. But if you signed up to this webinar and sat through me talking, that must mean that you care about sustainability in some way, which is great. We are facing a climate crisis. Every choice and action matters. And if any part of what I've said struck a chord or made you think a little differently, I implore you to take that and share it with colleagues or a friend and make it part of your mindset going forwards. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. That is great, and I did say to you there will be a lot of clarity, and yes, I can confirm there will definitely be slides available because I know everyone wants them. So we have some questions for you. Michael makes a really interesting point here. You mentioned localization and material process as innovation as important sustainability strategies, but how can we balance products that are locally available with products that are more sustainably made but further away from the user? So have you word whether AI can help in any of those judgments?
Well, I'm sure it can. That's a really, really good question. And I think I kind of touched on it in the presentation, but there isn't a right answer for everything. There are different kind of payoffs that you need to consider. The raw materials that go into a product tend to make up around 95% of the embodied carbon of a product. So if you can always prioritise what goes into a product first and foremost. That is the way that you can have the biggest impact. Second is the transportation. So hopefully that can help prioritise decision making.
Great, thank you very much. But are you seeing AI playing any part in the sustainability process at all at the moment?
Yeah, so it's cropping up quite frequently with carbon data and carbon analysis and those kind of things. We're able to kind of use AI to provide quicker data. The one thing that we need to keep being kind of cautious of is the methodology that the AI is using and how reliant and reliable that kind of information is and how consistent.
Yeah, thank you. You talked about lots of different terminology being used. Is there somewhere where we can go that's easy to navigate and gives us a lot more clarification, a website or anything like that?
Yes, there is. So there's a really cool organisation based in the UK called the Carbon Literacy Project, who kind of their whole ethos is to make things more accessible. In the NaughtOne sustainability report, we have a glossary at the back where we've included definitions of any kind of technical language, and then there's kind of area specific resources that you can use. So if circularity is something of interest, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation is an excellent resource for all kinds of things on circularity.
That's superb. We'll include those links in the follow-up. Rosie says it would be great to see a traffic light code on furniture. We manage it for every single item of food in the country, so I'm sure perhaps with government intention, the same could be done for furniture in its sustainability level.
Yes, absolutely. I agree.
That's great. Thank you. Dan asks, which brand outside the furniture industry do you most admire for its approach to sustainability and why?
That's a really good question, and I don't just want to say Patagonia because I think that's what everyone says.
Yeah.
I'm really interested in kind of the food supply chain, and I think M&S, Marks and Spencers, do a really good job of being quite transparent with their supply chain and the data that they have. And I think it's called Plan. There's no Plan B or Plan A, or I can't quite remember the name. But even down to kind of the ingredients list of their cornflakes is 100% corn, and I really appreciate just the level of transparency that Marks and Spencers are using.
Great. Now you talk about transparency, Bethany, and today you've been quite candid and honest about the furniture industry. That comes with a risk. Tell me a little bit about how you've managed that and what you might say to people about that.
Yeah, and it is a risk. I think we see people out in the industry making some quite snazzy claims that just doesn't really fit with NaughtOne's ethos and authenticity. We would much rather be impactful than loud. So I'd like to think that the way that we speak about sustainability, both me speaking and in our marketing material and all those types of things, I hope really do come across as thoughtful and backed up in facts and data. But it is something that it is a risk for sure, but it's something that we consider as important.
Yeah, we've got to be honest, and we know there are challenges, always challenges. Stephen asks, what are your thoughts on product passports and how close do you think the industry is to adopting them as the norm?
Yes, so we have released our first iterations of product passports called product IDs. And the difficulty that we've had is just kind of getting the unique identifier in all of our products. So we've worked really hard. I think it's coming really soon. I think the furniture industry is the next industry that's been kind of signposted as what needs to happen next with the EU legislation. But I think it'll be transformational for our supply chain and being able to provide key information to our consumers that we don't always get access to, and we aren't able to always pass on this really integral information. So I think they'll be really key for that.
Thank you. Rebecca asked a question, and I'm hoping you understand it. Rebecca's incredibly well qualified, and I'm sure you are. From a global client perspective, which sustainable ingredient sheet do you prefer? Which source is most comprehensive for the client? HBT, declare, EPD. I guess this is kind of guidance forms, is it? Is that what that is?
Yeah, so health product declarations focus on kind of chemical compliance and the kind of types of material composition that's within a product, whereas EPDs focus more on the embodied carbon. So both are great, and both provide lots of really good information. But I think what kind of Rebecca's referring to there is there's not kind of one thing that encompasses everything that you would need to know from an audited and credible point of view. And I think that's what the industry is kind of really calling out for, is one cohesive source of truth, which would be great. In answer to which do I prefer, they're all great because they all provide transparency and honesty. But yeah, I wish there was one that kind of covered everything.
Great, thank you. Andrew raises the point. I mean, he makes the point earlier that actually circularity's got to be the key to a lot of this, which is,
Yeah.
and that's a challenge. But how do we get people to pay more for better products, because they are going to cost more, and
They
they're
are,
going to be
yeah.
better made?
Yeah, I think education and communication is a big part of that. Being able to explain why certain products cost that little bit more because of the material choices or because of the kind of quality of engineering that's gone behind that is key to kind of justifying that price tag.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm sat on a chair at the moment, which I've been at the company for 27 years, and I've had it for 23 of those 27 years. So that's it. And yes, I know I didn't pay for it, but that kind of gives you an idea of why it's worth doing it. You mentioned your favourite company with regards to sustainability, and you mentioned the British one. Do you know, is there an American one you're aware of that you think does a great job, or maybe you don't buy things from America or don't?
I'm less familiar with American brands. The only one that comes to mind is Patagonia
Yeah.
because I think they are American. They're incredible, and if you want to read a good sustainability report, they've just released their first one. I would check that out. That's got lots of really useful information.
Great. Thank you very much. How easy is it for you to revisit products you've already made and go, okay, how do we make these more sustainable?
It depends. So sometimes it can be quite difficult. So if there's kind of high levels of machinery involved, and it would mean changing that machinery and all those kind of things, it can be quite difficult. But sometimes if there's a really good material that can be swapped out, it can be relatively simple. So BioPure, for those that aren't aware, is a biomass balanced petroleum polyurethane foam, which uses less petroleum but more bio-based materials within its foam, and it is a direct swap out for more traditional foam. So in those types of instances, it's quite easy. But unfortunately, that's not always the case.
Great, thank you. Renee asks, building on Andrew's inquiry, is there a calculation we can employ to articulate the life cycle of a product?
So something like that exists for the embodied carbon of a product, which is just called an LCA, or a life cycle analysis, which is what goes into an EPD. But if you're referring to kind of the circularity of the product, no, and that's a really interesting point, and I'll have to have a think of what that could look like and how that could be presented. But that's a really good question.
Yeah, and Heather raises this point. It's not always about the price, but it's about the cost, and what is the cost to people personally. And I love that.
Yeah.
And that's always a challenge. It's a bit like, the healthy food. It's got about, it's not just the cost, it's the value, all those kind of things. A huge challenge. I have a question for you. I keep hearing the term greenwashing a lot. Could you explain what you think that means, and why
Yes.
people are using it?
Yeah. So greenwashing is when a company or a person makes a claim using, well, they can do it in a few different ways, but an example is using vague terminology such as carbon neutrality, for example, to kind of use it as a marketing ploy, if you will. And it can be quite damaging for the industry, and it can kind of lead consumers a bit down the garden path around what is sustainable and what isn't. So that's why kind of the first bit of my presentation, I talked about all the different kind of terminologies that you see out there, and hopefully provided you all with kind of a little bit more knowledge of what they all actually mean, so you can kind of interrogate those claims when you do see them out in the wild.
Thank you. Someone's asked, could you clarify carbon offsetting a little more, please? What's the process?
Yes, so I'll use the example of tree planting. So I could buy 1 carbon offset from a tree planting project. And what that means is, let's say it is £10. I can buy £10 of carbon credit. And in that £10, let's pretend there's 10 kilograms of CO2. So I have paid for £10 worth, and that means that the trees eventually, theoretically, should grow up, mature, and sequester 10 kilograms of CO2. So if I had a chair that every time it was produced, the embodied carbon was 20 kilograms of CO2, I could then purchase 20 kilograms pounds worth of carbon credit to offset that chair, which would then mean that that chair has technically emitted 0 carbon emissions, if that makes sense. But that it's complex, and how one person might work out that that tree can sequester 10 kilograms of CO2, but another person might work out that it's actually 12 kilograms of CO2. So it differs. And then, as I mentioned in my presentation, sometimes those trees don't always get to be mature. Sometimes they get cut down or diseased or wildfires, etc. So there's just a little bit of kind of grey area around offsets. There are some really, really good ones, so I don't want it to come across like I am vetoing carbon offsets, because I'm not. There's some really, really good, well-managed projects that have got really sound and robust methodologies around them, and they're great. But I hope that's clarified it a little bit. They're intentionally a little bit complex, I think.
Yeah. Bethany, thank you very much for an outstanding presentation. Thank you everyone for joining us today, and I'm sure you're joining me in saying great big thank you to Bethany. Thank you, Bethany.
No, thank you for having me.